Thank you all for being here. It's wonderful to see such a full house. Thank you, Naima. It's so difficult to follow you. Both your very clear historical context that you gave us, and of course your personal story. Naima is one of our Palestinian students who, on top of everything, are being attacked daily by British media, such as the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Mail, the Islamophobia Chronicle, namely the Jewish Chronicle, for expressing their pain, their hopes, their aspiration. They are condemned as supporters of terrorism and so on. This is a shameful moment for British media, and they cannot stand the fact that there are 30 young Palestinians, especially Palestinian women, who are not afraid to tell the British public what they are going through and what they are hopes for. And I hope you, as the community in Exeter, will support us, because this is just the beginning of the assault on freedom of speech on Palestine in this country. And this is quite incredible, because as things are unfolding on the ground, even traditional friends of Israel find it difficult to stick to their policies. Suddenly, the United States, probably for the first time since 1948, abstained in the Security Council from a resolution Israel acceded to veto. For the first time, the Irish government is joining South Africa in the International Court of Justice to continue the process of bringing Israel to justice as a state that commits genocide in Gaza. Belgium, Iceland are taking actions to show to their own public that they are listening to their societies and are doing things that might be symbolic in the end of the day and will not, unfortunately, stop the genocide. But at least people in those countries have a feeling that the politicians are not totally indifferent for a genocide, the worst genocide since 1945, unfolding in front of our eyes on a daily basis. At this time, where even Israel's greatest supporters in the West and in the global North are beginning to feel uncomfortable and to talk even openly, not just back rooms, about the possibility of imposing sanctions on Israel, the British government is busy in preparing a new definition of extremism that is meant to silence support for Palestine. They are covering it up as a universal description, a universal kind of approach to extremism, and they will talk about Islamophobia, of course, they will mention it. But with the leakage that we receive, and I talked to some members of parliament on this, the leakage that we have from the team, the list that is already prepared for the extreme, of being extreme, has one thing in common. They all stand by Palestine in its struggle for liberation. These are now going to be targeted by the British government as extremist pro-terrorist organization. And this is something the British public can change. This is something the British public can reject. You have the power not to allow to happen. It's not true that we are all helpless in front of what's going on in this country. This will not stop the genocide in Gaza, but it will be part of an overall effort in civil society all over the world to make sure that our political elites, mainstream media, at least begins to reflect our basic instinct and impulses when it comes to what's going on in Gaza. And this is one of the reasons that our Center for Palestine Studies, and I, like one of the students that was attacked there, is constantly attacked, because there is a sense among the pro-Zionist, pro-Israeli lobby in this country that they are now facing a reality which they cannot beautify, that they find it very difficult to justify. And yet, by inertia, by fear, by intimidation, God knows why, they continue to justify it, which is not the worst part of it, but they continue to do all they can to silence our right to tell the British government that every day that it doesn't impose sanctions on the arms sales to Israel, that it is one of Israel's most important providers of arms, makes it complicit with the genocide in Gaza. This government is already complicit with the genocide in Gaza. So we have a role in Britain, not only to show solidarity with the victims of genocide, not only be part of a global effort to try and bring an end to the Israeli genocide, but to make sure that we understand that the British government is complicit with this crime against humanity. And as people who live in this country, understand there's something even more profound when it comes to the British government. As Naima has gave us a little bit of the historical context, the genocide in Gaza was not born out of the context. It's part of the impulse of the Zionist project ever since it appeared in Palestine in the late 19th century to turn Palestine, it was an Arab, Muslim, Middle Eastern country, into an exclusive Jewish state. And the only way you can turn a country which is organically part of the Arab world, organically part of the Muslim world, which has, when the first Zionists arrived, a majority of more than 90% of the indigenous people. The only way you can do it is by forcefully displacing the people. At first, you displace a small number of people because the settler movement itself is small and is not strong enough. Then you can displace a large number. And ironically, because you cannot complete the displacement as they had done in 1948, you continue the displacement until this very day. Much of what Israel is doing in Gaza today, which it likes to show, to tell the world that it is retaliation for the 7th of October, or that it is a war of self-defense, much of what it does is using the historical, the pretext of the 7th of October to complete the ethnic cleansing of 1948. And the one important historical fact that allowed the Zionist movement to build the infrastructure that made it possible for that movement until 1948 and for the state of Israel since 1948 to constantly be busy in ethnic cleansing, oppression, ghettoizing people, killing people. The one country that provided the foundation for this project was Britain. So that you would have expected Britain, of all places, to feel the need not to be complicit with a crime against humanity that has its historical and moral foundation in the Anglo-British, in the Anglo-Zionist alliance that goes back to the Balfour Declaration in 1917, and much later than the Balfour Declaration, not only through the particular collusion in 1956 in the Suez crisis, but also, if you all remember, through the organizations such as the Labor Friends of Israel, the Conservative Friends of Israel, powerful lobbies that made sure that British policies from 1948 until today were the worst in Europe, apart from Germany, for maybe more understandable reasons, when it came to facing the Israeli criminal policies on the ground. This is something we have to remember when we are facing the government and the mainstream media and demanding in the name of accusing the government of complicity, not to recommend we should not rest until we get some sort of response. And some of our members of parliament from this area and the southwest altogether have also not excelled in their the moral constitution that shows that they either understand what goes on or they understand their moral responsibility and the kind location that they have in the pages of history in years to come. This is something that will come back on people, because this genocide may not move the hearts, the minds of British ministers today, but will eventually be remembered and recollected as one of the worst moments in the history of the 20th century. So I think this is something to worry. In my second part of my talk, I want to inject some optimism, because I know it's a terrible moment of darkness. And it would be totally irresponsible to say that there is any hope for a change within Israel, for a different policy or attitude towards the Palestinian, that there is a chance for a swift transformation in the international community's attitude and action towards Palestine in the next year, 2 or 3. It would be irresponsible to say that these are viable scenarios. They are not. The Israel as a state is not only finding it difficult to finish what it wanted to finish in the Gaza Strip, but it's already thinking about the implication of what it did in Gaza towards the implication for its future policy towards the West Bank, towards the Palestinian minority inside Israel, and towards southern Lebanon. And for all you know, Israelis somehow think that Hebrew is a secret language nobody understands. So when they talk to themselves, they talk very differently from the way they talk to the outside world. But some of us, for good reasons, know Hebrew. And the very essence of the Israeli discourse now is that there needs to be a preemptive Israeli policy towards the West Bank, towards the Palestinians and Israel, and towards southern Lebanon, so that the 7th of October will not repeat itself. No conversation about, if you don't want the 7th of October to repeat itself, stop the occupation, stop the genocide, stop the dispossession, decolonize Palestine. Not one word in this direction in Israel. The only conclusion they have derived from the 7th of October is that in order to prevent it from recurring, they have to be proactive as far as the West Bank. They're already very proactive, unfortunately, the West Bank. They already killed more than 400 Palestinians in the West Bank and arrested 7,000 people, and to be proactive towards their own Palestinian citizens who are now facing a series of draconian legislation and regulation that would make them more unequal than they already were in the apartheid state of Israel. And of course, there is the big plan for a military invasion of southern Lebanon, and everybody can imagine the horrific consequences of such operation. But this is the mentality. This is the discourse. This is the conversation. So the next 2 or 3 years, as far as Israel is concerned, is not only more of the same, worse than the same that happened. The international community, well, we know there will be elections in the United States, and really, as far as Palestine is concerned, unfortunately, Biden and Trump are two irrelevant choices as far as change in the basic American attitude towards Palestine and Israel is concerned. There are no significant changes in the global north altogether that indicate in the next 2 or 3 years any courageous stand that would go beyond words into meaningful sanctions. But this is the next 2 years or so. One has to be realistic, and it would be, as I said, irresponsible to say that next year something better is going to happen. The Palestinian people would resist. They would show, as they always show, resilience resistance, but they would be exposed to a very powerful military state that would use everything it has to oppress. So where is the good news? I think, and I'm saying this as a scholar, not as an activist. Up to now, I spoke as an activist. As a scholar, someone who really follows academically the history of Israel and Palestine, the current reality. There is a very acute sense that the project of Zionism is collapsing. In fact, the fierce ruthlessness that I anticipate, unfortunately, that would continue for a while is because of the imminent collapse of the Zionist project. If you remember, in South Africa, the regime in South Africa was particularly fierce, particularly callous, particularly ruthless in its last days. Because regimes like this, when they understand that the earth underneath them is shaking, are doing all they can to keep it together without any inhibition, without any moral inhibitions, and allowing this is the moment where their own fanatic elements are moving from the margins into the center and are directing the ship into its abyss and disaster. So first of all, you have a total collapse of the idea of a Jewish nation. This has nothing to do with the Palestinians. Until the 7th of October, and in fact, without the 7th of October, we would have been even more aware of this, there was a civil war in Israel. The idea that a faith, religion, could be a basis for a national identity is not working. The secular Jews in Israel, as they are being called, or they can call them the state of Israel, or the state of Tel Aviv, and the religious Jews and the settler Jews, you can call them the state of Judea, have found out at the very moment, apart from one thing, the need to continue to oppress Palestinians and colonize them and fight against them. But if you take out this common need, as they would see it, for survival, they suddenly found out that they don't share anything, not in how public domain should look like, what should be the educational system, what should be the cultural values of the society, and hundreds of thousands of secular Israelis, if you remember, demonstrated daily in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, relocated their money and themselves, some of them outside of Israel, refused to go to the army, feeling that they are the ones who carry the burden of the Zionist state, while the fanatics who don't serve in the army are the ones who determine how the public space would look like in Israel. This is the result of the invalid idea that Judaism can be nationalist. Hinduism cannot be nationalist. Christianity cannot be nationalism, and Islam cannot be nationalist. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. The faith is the faith, the religion. If you turn it into ideology, you run into the kind of troubles that Israel has at this moment. But it's not only the totally lack of a common base, it is also the vision for the future, which the Israeli leaders from all political parties are giving their own society. Again, in the media, in the secret language that they think nobody understands. They tell their own audiences when they're asked that people ask them, what do you see in our horizon in Israel for the next 50 years? They say, well, one war after the other. That's the only thing we can do. We will have to fight daily and relentlessly and continuously, and everybody would have to go to the army, including the ultra-Orthodox Jews who don't want to go to the army, and we will have to find a way either to recruit the Arabs of Israel to the army or we'll kick them out, because in the next 50 years, this is our destiny. Now, some of them are being persuaded by the government's narrative that this is the fate of Jews wherever they are. The Jews are always hated, and that's why they always have to to fight for survival. I doubt whether in the long run, young Israelis would buy into this narrative that this is life. This is the only way of living. So also the horizon doesn't bode well for the state. The government is not functioning. It's Israeli politicians years went by became more and more incompetent. This incompetence is one of the reasons they behaved the way, or they reacted the way they reacted to the 7th of October, not only in terms of what on the day itself, but to the aftermath. It was only until today, almost half a year since the 7th of October, it's only the civil society in Israel that provides some aid for people who decided to live in the south or in the north. The government is not functioning. Economy that was once boasted as the best economy in the OECD is now in need constant injection of American money. The Americans are going to give Israel this year alone $14 billion on the American taxpayer just to keep the Israeli economy alive. Now, whether it's Trump or Biden, whether they are Republicans or Democrats, the United States might think twice whether this is a strategic ally or is it a strategic headache to have a state that needs so much financial and military aid to exist as an alien element in the Mediterranean, or in the Arab world as a whole. I don't see it in the long term sustainable, even from a cynical American point of view. Not to mention the fact that we don't live anymore in a world that only America controls. There is the global South. And the global South has its own powers. And these powers have a different perspective of Israel. They can be also civic. They can have military agreements with Israel. I'm not underestimating that part of capitalism and the strategic alliance. However, they are in a different place when it comes to the Palestinians and the support of their own societies to the Palestinians. And I think this shifting constellation in the global world, where America would shrink into a more isolationist policies and other global powers would become dominant, would also add another discrete process that will bring down eventually the Zionist not to mention the fact that I'm very hopeful about the Palestinian national movement. I know it looks now distraught, malfunctioning, fragmented, disunited. But the Palestinian society is the youngest in the world. And when I listen to the young Palestinians, I don't hear the same bickering, infighting that I hear in the older generation. The younger Palestinians have a much more common vision than the older one. They know exactly what they want to achieve. They know exactly how to talk to each other, whether they're inside Israel, in Gaza, in Detroit, or in Exeter. They are far more in communication with each other. They're speaking the same language. They are sharing the same vision. And one day, which is really what they still need, they would, I think, also provide an organization that will channel all this very important energy to help us, even in Exeter, as a Palestine Solidarity, to have even a better compass and orientation how to help to liberate and decolonize Palestine. So this would also be effective. So, and I'm saying again, this not as an activist, I'm really convinced that historically we're beginning to see the cracks in the building which is called Zion. The only cracks. So there is this charade of the building still standing. But we know from history, there's a point where the cracks become so wide that there is a collapse. And collapses in history are very quick. And collapses are not always something that immediately creates something positive. They can create a vacuum, they can create chaos. And this is the agency of the Palestinians to be there, to be able to fill the vacuum. But I think if you look a little bit beyond Palestine, you look at Syria, which is a failed state. You look at Lebanon, which is a failed state. Jordan may seem to be a more valid state, but it also is very precarious. foundation. The whole structure that Europe, especially Britain and France, had built in the Eastern Mediterranean after the First World War, importing the idea of the European nation state to this part of the world, it's not working. It's not working. We can see it in front of me. I'm not a prophet here. I'm a reporter. I'm telling you from the field, it's gone. It's not working. We are surrounded in Palestine by failed states. And one of them is Israel. And these failed states, hopefully, would be replaced by a political system. And I think the Palestinian movement would be the one that would lead the way to rebuilding an Eastern Mediterranean that respected collective identities, that respected the history and civilization to which it belonged, and rectified the injustices of displacement, ethnic cleansing, robbery of land, in order to create a foundation for a new distribution of the resources, of the human resources and the natural resources. Because, among other things, this area would have to deal with the ecological danger. And the present political structure of the Eastern Mediterranean will not be enabled to deal with what the ecological threat is giving us or is unfolding in front of our eyes. But they can do it, and they have been able in the history to do it. So this is something that is happening, and we shouldn't be just observers. With this, I will end. We should not be just observers of a decolonization that is already taking in front of our eyes. And you would say, how can he talk about decolonization? There's genocide in Gaza, but the genocide, unfortunately, is because this so-called only democracy in the Middle East that has the most moral army in the Middle East cannot even begin to persuade one person in the world that it is now a democracy or moral or not a rogue state that pursues criminal policies. It's horrific that this is the price Palestinians have to pay, but this means that we should not be just observers, and we should openly talk about the need to decolonize Palestine. We should not be afraid to tell people that Zionism is racist, and that the source of the problem that prevents us from, in Israel and in Palestine, for having a normal life, a just life, is the Zionist ideology, not the political Islamic ideology, not the Hamas, not the Jihad. The problem has been in the last 120 years a racist ideology called Zionism. Now, I'm going back to my first point. A sentence like this, according to the new definition of extremism, I should see now in the court two policemen coming and take me to jail, which in Exeter is near the university, so I don't. This is exactly where the junction we are there. We should talk in a very clear language, not just the language of genocide, the language of racism, the language of apartheid. We should not be afraid or be mesmerized by people saying to us, don't talk about Zionism because it makes Jewish people feel uncomfortable. If they feel uncomfortable, they should go to the boots pharmacy. This is not about being uncomfortable. This is about talking the accurate language about a crime that has not begun on the 7th of October, but started with the help of the British government in 1917 and has not ended for one day. And we should, with the right language, at least convey a very clear message. Who are the criminals? Who are the victims? What is the nature of the crime? And how best to stop it? Thank you very much.